friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. I am quite overdue in talking about the books that I read the second half of June. I did do a mid-month wrap-up in the middle of June where I talked about the first 11 books I read this month, and I have 12 more books to talk about today. Crazy. I read 23 books in the month of June. 11 of them were audiobooks, and I did have a super long car ride in there, so that helps explain some of it. Four of them were Bridgerton series books, so they were relatively quick reads in that I couldn't stop reading them. And I read almost each of those in a single day. So I had a lot of fantastic books in the month of June, and I am going to talk about the 12 books that I read at the end of the month. I will link down below my mid-month wrap up if you're interested in the first 11 books that I read. I'm not going to even mention them here because the majority of them were either audiobooks or library books, and I just don't have them anymore. So I'm just going to jump right into the second half of the month and tell you what I read. 12 of them, 12 books. The first one I can't find. And I've been talking about this a lot because it was my patron book club pick for the month of June, and that is The Orphan Collector by Ellen Marie Wiseman. I gave this book 5 stars. I just loved it so much. I was completely drawn into the story. Let me tell you, Ellen Marie Wiseman does not hold back on some of her descriptions. This book takes place during the Spanish flu in 1918 in Philadelphia. We follow 2 women. Pia is a young girl whose mom dies very early on because of the flu, and she is stuck taking care of her 2 twin baby brothers. Pia, very early on, just has to leave her apartment because she needs to go get food for her and her brothers. While Pia is out looking for food, she herself gets sick and faints on the street, wakes up 6 days later, and is devastated because she knows she left her brothers home alone. We kind of follow her story from there. Shame and grief follow her through the course of what happens to her. We see inside the orphanage system at the time. And then we also follow this woman, Bernice, who is one of the best written villains. She's just an awful sociopath, psycho lady. Holy moly. When we first meet Bernice, I had some compassion for her because she lost her baby boy to the flu, and she's just surrounded by this cloud of grief. And so some of the decisions that she makes towards the beginning, I can kind of give her a pass on some of them. But her bigotry and her heinous acts towards immigrant children throughout the rest of the story really just make you hate her. And sometimes it's good to have a villain that you just hate because they're fictional, right? Like, she just was horrible. And so this book was, for the most part, pretty heavy, pretty sad, pretty just weighty in its descriptions and in all that was happening. There were some bright spots throughout the story. Pia's friend Finn, who we meet a couple different times throughout the story, loved Finn so much, and he was just so kind and caring and thoughtful. He just was a fabulous boy. And then the family that we meet towards the end, the Hunters, I forget their name now. They're also, at first I wasn't sure if I was going to appreciate them, but I do like how it all came together. It did, at the end, there was a time jump of a few years, and I'm never a big fan of that. And then everything did kind of wrap up in a big red bow. And some people don't really love that. But in this book that felt so heavy, I was totally fine with the way things wrapped up. It might not have been 100% realistic, but it felt right for this story. So I did end up giving The Orphan Collector 5 stars. I had a fantastic time reading and discussing that with my patron book club. So thank you so much to those of you who have joined my Patreon community. And I'm so glad that this one was a better hit than last month's book. So yay for that. Then I have a few audiobooks that I listened to. I have a lot more audiobooks that I listen to, but one of them is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. This is just a fun romance. It kind of is it reminded me of The One by John Mars, only that one is more on the thriller side of things. This is more on the romance side of things. So there's this DNA matchmaking system, program app that you give some of your DNA and you get matched up with your soulmate. And the guy who runs the company is kind of this curmudgeon, very focused, somewhat shy, Mr. Darcy-esque type of character. And then this girl who's kind of doesn't look like she's got her life together. They meet in this coffee shop and learn about his company, this DNA matching company. So her and her friend decide to try it out. And of course they get matched up, and it's predictable and fun. I'm glad that I enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and I've had a couple misses with Christina Lauren. I'm not going far back into their backlist because they have written a couple quite steamy books, romances. This one wasn't too bad. There was a couple scenes towards the end, but it wasn't like steamy all the way throughout. But some of their most recent books, Twice in a Blue Moon, I did not like. The Honey Don't List, I did not like. In Holidays was just okay. So I had a couple misses with some of their more recent books, but this one was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I read it. Then we have The Last Bookshop in London, which was a library book. This was on my anticipated reads for the spring. I really enjoyed this one. I also gave it 4 stars. This one is by Madeline Martin, and in it we follow Grace, who moves to London with her best friend. They just kind of want to get out of their small town, but they moved to London right at 1939. So at the very beginning of World War II. It hasn't quite come to London yet, but it does very shortly. She gets a job at a bookshop with an owner that's kind of cranky and very unorganized, and Grace does an amazing job transforming this bookshop. And this bookshop kind of becomes something that she didn't expect in her life. She doesn't start out as a reader at all, but she kind of ends up falling in love with reading, falling in love with not falling in love, but this old man kind of becomes super important to her, who runs the shop. She ends up finding a way to get involved in the war effort as well, and just discovers how storytelling and a love of books can unite a community, even in the midst of blackouts and Blitz, the bombing Blitz that the Germans did on London, and all of these horrible aspects of war. She just discovers her love of books and how storytelling can bring a community together. It was very sweet. It felt a little bit light, even though there was some heavy topics discussed. A lot of people that they knew their houses and livelihoods were destroyed because of the bombs. But because storytelling was really the center, this bookshop was really the center of the story. Not light. It didn't feel light. It was still a World War II novel, but it wasn't as harrowing as some others that I have read. I really did enjoy it. And so I gave that one 4 stars. An audiobook that I listened to that kind of was a surprise hit for me, I ended up giving this 5 stars. And that is The Scent Keeper by Erica Bauermeister. I was thinking this was going to be a lot lighter than it was. This was a pretty heavy-duty book and so different from anything else that I have read before. In this novel, we follow Emmeline and her father, who live isolated on this island, and her father is a scent keeper. He has this machine that is able to capture the scent of a moment, and he has this wall filled with scents. They're all waxed and sealed up. And Emmeline is quite young when the story begins, and they are just surviving on this island, and the dad has taught her how to forage and teaches her how to use her own scent ability, and she is pretty talented at it, until one day she starts to realize that her dad has been lying to her about things. He has not been telling her the full truth, and she is devastated and does some pretty horrible things as a young teen. She's like 12 or 13 at that point. And then tragedy hits and she has to leave the island. And then from there just is super overwhelmed by the world, because all she's ever known was isolation on this island with her father. And so we explore what that was like for her to leave the island. And this book stuck with me for a little while after I read it. I thought the writing was beautiful. I thought the descriptions and the way that scent was such a huge part of the book was so cool. You don't often find books that evoke a lot of senses, and this one definitely did its best to do that. I thought it was pretty cool. And it was pretty sad. There were some heavy duty things, some domestic abuse. There was some like abandonment from the mother. There was just a lot of heavy duty things that were discussed in this book, but there were also some definitely brilliantly written parts and just the story was just so unique. I don't know what else to say about it. It was fantastic and I gave it 5 stars. Another audiobook that I listened to that was very different and not necessarily in the greatest way for me was Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This was somewhat strange. In this book, we follow a young tech whiz, Lois, who gets a job in San Francisco working for a big tech company, and she's super smart. She's kind of like uber stressed out though, and discovers this small restaurant, not even really a restaurant. I don't know if she finds a menu or something. She orders this food and it starts to transform her life. And it turns out to be this duo of brothers who are cooking in their kitchen and delivering it around the neighborhood. So it's not exactly legal or like health code passing all the health codes. But part of what they serve her is the sourdough bread. She just begins this friendship with these 2 brothers, the one who cooks and the one who delivers. And she calls almost every day ordering this food, and it brings her some peace and some light in the midst of her stress at work. Long days and all the pressure that she feels from work. Then the brothers decide they're moving. They're leaving to go back over to Europe, and they leave her their sourdough starter. And she knows nothing about sourdough, and so she starts to research and figure out what she needs to do to the starter and tries to make bread from it. And then making bread kind of becomes another form of self-care in a way for her, stress relief. And it turns out this starter is pretty amazing. Sourdough is its own character, and I was with it. I was enjoying listening to it, but by the end, whoa, it took a turn that I just was not expecting, and it was almost comical and so unbelievable. And I mean, I was with it at the beginning, like the sourdough likes music, the starter likes music, and it kind of smells like bananas, and just some random things about this sourdough starter that were a little bit strange, but by the end it got real strange. And I don't think I loved it. I ended up only giving this 3 stars. It was a fun listening experience. I was captivated, I was into it, but ultimately it just was a little too strange for me. Oh, and then there was a romance that just kind of popped up out of nowhere, and I wasn't prepared for that. I was like, wait a minute, were we building towards that? Because I missed it. I missed where we were building towards this romance. So 3 stars. Not horrible, not great. Another library book that I borrowed this month was Remember. Well, not this month. I borrowed it a long time ago and I finally finished it in June. That is Remember, the nonfiction by Lisa Genova that's all about memory. I gave this one 4 stars. Really, it should be a 3 because I ended up getting pretty bored. I was very interested at the beginning. I think I spread it out too far. I think that's my problem. But this is all about like, how do our brains work and how do we form and keep memories. So we learned about the hippocampus and not all the different, but we learned about different parts of our brain and what parts make memories and how to retain those memories. And if we're not remembering something, it's because we didn't put our attention to it at the beginning. And then it does get into Alzheimer's and dementia towards the end. It did just get a little bit too much for me. At the beginning, I felt like her writing style was very approachable and I was learning a lot and I was very interested, but I had set it down too many times. I think that's just the problem. It was interesting. I'm just gonna keep it at the 4 stars because I learned a lot. Will I remember everything that I learned? Probably not. Maybe because I wasn't putting enough attention to it when I was reading it, which is what I learned in that book. I actually read a digital book this month, an ebook. Can you believe it? I'm so proud of myself. Every month I ask my my $8 patrons to recommend books to me, and then I pick them up out of a jar. In June, I picked Cocaine Blues by Kerry Winfrey, which is the first in the Fryn Fisher mystery series. This is an Australian mystery series, and I sadly did not love this book. I couldn't get past the main character. I didn't really love her. I found her to be slightly arrogant, but also just very free with her body, just a very different set of moral code than what I have. I don't need to read characters in books that have the same moral values that I do, but this was just a lot. And then the main mysteries in this book, there were 2 main mysteries. There was like a short one at the very beginning as we were getting to know her. She was at a dinner party, jewels get stolen, she solves it right away. We kind of get to know she has this ability to really figure out stuff. And I liked that about her. And then there were 2 main mysteries. One of them was about an abortion butcher doctor, like not a regular doctor, not healthy. These women are dying and he's just getting away with it. And he's actually like having his way with these girls before performing botched abortions on them. Like, horrible guy. That's one part of the mystery. And the second mystery is all about a cocaine ring, drug ring that takes place. And it all takes place in Australia. And I don't know if some of that goes over my head because I'm just not familiar enough with an Australian setting. I think it takes place in Melbourne, I want to say. I could be wrong about that. But we're in like like a Turkish spa, like bath spa type of a place. We're in all of these fancy restaurants. And Frin is just kind of making Frin Fisher is kind of making her way through this setting and trying to figure things out. And I don't know that I caught on with enough of the clues to try to figure it out on my own. I often just couldn't figure out what was even going on. Maybe it was because I was reading on ebook and I'm just not used to that. Maybe it was because I spread it out for a little bit too long and didn't sit down and read it all at once. Maybe it was just the language. I'm not sure what it is that I just couldn't really connect with. And I just didn't care about either of the two main mysteries. I don't know, I wasn't into it. And a lot of times I was like, whoa, what? She's doing what? So I wasn't a big fan of that one, sorry. Then I had my long road trip and I had some more audiobooks going on. Actually, Sourdough was one of those on the road trip, but another one was A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore. And I did not like this one as much as the first one. The first one was Bringing Down the Duke. And we do still follow kind of the suffragist movement in London in this one. And we follow one of the friends of the character who was in the first book. Lucy is our main character in this one, and she is a hardcore suffragist, very focused on her mission, kind of bossy, kind of like my way or the highway type of a person. Like, she's very, very, very focused and leads this chapter of the suffragettes in London, I guess. Lucy and her team of people have raised money to buy part of the 50% of the stocks in this publishing company, newspaper company, and they want to buy it so that they can publish their findings. They did this big data collection type of thing, and they want to buy this newspaper in order to publish the results. Well, along comes Tristan, who was a family friend when they were younger and always kind of teased Lucy, and they never really got along. So there's a lot of battle of wills in this one. But Tristan has been holding a torch for Lacey since he was young. She has no clue, no clue whatsoever. So it was kind of fun because it was a little twist. Like, sometimes it's the girl who's holding a candle for the guy, and in this case, he has loved her for a long time, but he's very antagonistic and she is very antagonistic, and they just butt heads over and over and over and over until they're sleeping together. I didn't care as much about the characters or the story in this one. It was a fun listen on my drive. Like, I was into it, and it's pretty long. Like, it's a chunker. I think it's a 13-hour audio. But I ended up giving this one 3 stars as well. I'm not going to end up keeping this one, and yeah, it was okay, but not great. Then I listened to the 8th Bridgerton book. Oh, finally, On the Way to the Wedding, which is Gregory's story. And it was so cute. Oh, I just have loved reading through the Bridgertons this summer. I think I read all of them starting in May. I think I started in May, April maybe. But I've read all 8 of them this spring and summer. And they're by Julia Quinn. There's a family of 8 children. They're alphabetical. We end with Gregory. We already had Hyacinth. She's the 8th child, but we did her story in book 7. Gregory's story is that he believes in true love. He has seen 7 of his siblings get married for love, and he is determined that he is going to have a love match as well. He shows up at this party, sees the back of this woman's head, and is immediately in love with her. Of course he is. Hermione, the woman that he falls in love with by seeing the back of her neck, is unfortunately in love with someone else. And Hermione gets a lot of suitors. She's a beautiful woman. Hermione's best friend, Lady Lucinda, who went to school with her, they are best buddies and very close, which I loved their friendship. Lucinda is kind of always overshadowed by Hermione because of Hermione's glowing beauty, whatever. So Lucinda tries to help Gregory fall in love with Hermione, sort of. She warns him that it's not going to happen, but he's determined. So in the meantime, Lucinda and Gregory form this friendship, which of course is going to blossom into love. I just thought it was so much fun. It was lovely. Gregory takes a long time to realize what adult he's being. It was cute. It was very cute. I enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars, which is what I gave most of the Bridgerton books. There was a couple that only got 3 stars for me in the middle there, but most of them got 4 stars. Fun reads, very fun. Then also on the way home from Massachusetts, I listened to another somewhat chunky book, but it's YA. It kind of went a little bit fast, and that's The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I did give this one 4 stars as well. I found it very interesting, very heavy at times. This takes place mainly around this Ojibwe reservation in the Midwest. Our main character is 18 years old, Donis. I don't know how to say her name. I didn't listen to this, but I don't remember how they said her name now. She just really wants to go to college and kind of get out of her community. But then family tragedy strikes and she ends up having to stay home to take care of her mother. But things start to look up when this new kid, Jamie, comes to play on her brother Levi's hockey team. She also is a hockey player herself, which is kind of cool. So hockey is a surprisingly big part of this book, which I wasn't really prepared of. Not a huge part, but so this guy, Jamie, comes and everyone kind of loves him. He kind of forms a friendship with Donis and she kind of gets a crush on him, but then she starts to realize he's not maybe quite what he seems. But then she witnesses a brutal murder and it kind of gets wrapped up in this FBI investigation about dealing with meth drugs, particularly on the reservation. And so she ends up agreeing to go undercover and trying to help the FBI figure out what is going on and putting a stop to it. So it's pretty heavy duty. I mean, we're dealing with drugs and drug culture and people that you maybe wouldn't expect. I was captivated by the story. I loved learning about the different culture and practices on this reservation. I don't know how accurate it is. I know Angeline Boulley is an enrolled member of the Ojibwe community in the Upper Peninsula, the UP of Michigan. So it is Own Voices, which I really appreciate just learning about that. So this was pretty cool. And I did give it 4 stars. Very heavy though, and not my typical read, but I enjoyed it. I don't know if enjoy is the right word you can talk about for a drug investigation, like murder mystery, sort of. Yeah, it was crazy. A book that I finished in June that I had started a month or so ago is kind of this coffee table book, New York in Bloom. I started it in spring, hoping to kind of look through it all in spring. It's mostly pictures, but it does talk about the flower culture in New York City and different places to go and find flowers and different parks that have gardens. And it was a cool, like a love letter to flowers in New York City in the spring. And the pictures were just like beautiful. It was really, really a nice book to read. I gave it 5 stars. As far as a coffee table book goes, I thought it was stunningly done. So that's New York in Bloom by Georgiana Lane. And I think I put Paris in Bloom in my book outlet order, so that is coming soon. Yay. And then right at the very end of the month, technically July 1st, I finished book 2 in the Grisha trilogy, so Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. I'm reading this trilogy with Amanda from The Curly Reader, Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, and Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library. And for me, this was kind of a victim of second book syndrome. I found this one to be a little bit it had problems with pacing for me. There were parts that I was just straight bored. Like, can we please just move on to the next part? That was not the case in the first book at all. I absolutely devoured the first book and loved it and was captivated from page 1 till the end. They're not the best written books. Like, I'm not writing down quotes. I'm not blown away by the writing, but it's the story that's moving along. And in this one, the story kind of faltered a little bit, and I get where it had to go. And there were some scenes here and there that were super cool. We meet some new characters. We follow some of our old favorite characters, but it was just kind of book 1 was super fast paced. I have a feeling book 3 is going to be super fast paced, and this one needed to get from point A to point B And so there was a couple slower parts in the middle. I did give it 3 stars. I'm still very invested in the story. Alina and Mal are 2 main characters that we follow in the first book as well. I was a little frustrated with both of them at different times for different reasons. It was a little bit more teen angsty that we get. And I mean, you can kind of understand why at different times, but also I was like, could we please just sit down and have a conversation about this? So it was a little bit slower than I might have liked, but I've already started book 3 and I couldn't put it down the first night I picked it up. So yay for that. That is it. Whew, 13 books, some that I'm keeping on my shelves, some that I'm not. Overall, I feel like I had a fantastic month. 23 books, 11 audiobooks. I don't know how many 5 stars. How many 5 stars altogether? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 stars altogether. That's pretty decent. I'm down with it. I'm okay with that. That makes me happy. But I would love to chat with you about these books that I talked about today or anything else that you want to talk about. What was your favorite read from the month of June? Have you read any of these? Are you adding any of these to your TBR? Let's chat in the comments. Also give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. That really helps my channel. And I will be talking with you in another video very soon. Bye. Don't you love my new chair?